Hi everyone, welcome back to Talent Order's Breakfast Briefing. This week I'm joined by JP Cavanna, who is the Industry Director and Cybersecurity Strategy Lead for the UK and EMEA at Unisys, and we'll be discussing the impact COVID-19 is having on the cyber hiring market. JP, thank you so much for joining me this week. I really appreciate you taking the time to give your insights on this subject. Before we go into any questions, can you give the audience a bit of background on your career history?
Thanks very much for inviting me. I'm delighted to be here. So I've been in cybersecurity probably for about 18 or so years. And my current role at Unisys is helping our clients to strategize their cyber posture, if you like. So looking at, what's coming up in the future, how they can best create a stable, secure cybersecurity posture. Prior to that, immediately prior to Unisys, I built a global client-facing, cyber capability for a shipping classification company. But actually, I got into all of this in about 2003 during 19 years with the Met Police, where I got into digital forensics and then branched out into wider areas of cyber. And then prior to where I am now, so the recent history, it's been around managing and growing professional services businesses within large UK and global organisations, in a nutshell. And before all of that, I was a professional musician, a violinist. And that's going to be relevant, I think, in our chat this morning, hopefully, anyway.
Amazing. Well, thank you for that. Okay, my first question is, how has COVID impacted your employment?
Not too badly. Obviously, with the pandemic kicking off last March, all organisations suddenly had a massive pull up in terms of having to provide remote working capability in facilities. Revenues were hit very badly across all sectors. Whatever you were doing, revenues were hit. So probably like a lot of other companies at Unisys, we were asked, for example, to take a voluntary pay cut, which was not a problem at all. We ended the voluntary pay cut several months early because we'd managed to weather the storm. So actually it didn't have too negative an impact, and actually generated, for what I do, quite a lot of work, obviously, because organisations suddenly started to wonder how they were going to secure these massive attack surfaces that they created by providing remote working capabilities for people at home.
Working from home came with a lot of cyber risks, which in turn meant a lot of work for professionals like yourself. We saw the impact throughout various sectors due to companies being cautious, as we didn't know how long this was going to last. How do you believe the cyber hiring market has been impacted?
I think initially, certainly, part of my role is talking to industry advisors, third-party advisors and analysts, so people like Gartner, Forrester, IDC, ISG, people like that. And certainly at the beginning, back in March, there was a big impact in terms of transformation programs. So organizations with reducing revenues had to try and save money. So big transformation programs were pushed out. Any sort of hiring that would have been associated with those programs, of course, was put on hold. And that was the first part of it. So if you looked at Gartner, for example, they were forecasting an 8% drop in revenue spend on security and IT for that year, for 2020. If you look at Gartner later on in the year, they revised that from an 8% reduction to a 4% increase. So that's quite a big jump.
Yeah.
Associated with that means that transformation programs are maybe coming back on track. That organizations certainly have to do a lot more to secure the environments that they created as a result of the remote working requirements. So that's going to involve more hiring. So, to be honest with you, having looked at the job market all throughout last year, yes, there was a definite slump, sort of March to July. But then I saw, more and more opportunities coming up through the rest of the year. And what I see today, for example, obviously on LinkedIn, which is one of the main areas, is that there's a lot of stuff out there in terms of opportunity for all cybersecurity roles.
Absolutely, I agree. March to July, there was a lot of recruitment freezes. Again, companies were being cautious, but you're always going to need cyber professionals. There is always going to be that risk. So yeah, they needed to adapt. How do you believe the cyber hiring market has managed to adapt or will adapt?
So I think if you look at what happened last year with organisational posture, so it's back to this remote working thing. I think what happened for an awful lot of organisations is that they were thinking before COVID, before the pandemic, about things like cloud strategies. Should they move to the cloud? There's always been a lot of reticence around that because of the security implementation elements of that, and organizations maybe not understanding quite what they need to do in terms of that security and how to build the cloud out. So that's one area, and that's accelerated that discussion for them. So I think this year certainly there's going to be a big increase in cloud security and cloud programs, and actually there's going to be a need for people that are skilled in that area. And I think this is where there is a skills shortage. Good architects and consultants that can manage that transition into the cloud and manage cloud configurations afterwards, I think, are in short supply. And it's an interesting debate with the cyber skills shortage that you see everywhere. I've got some very personal views on that. These are absolutely my views, but I don't believe that there is a cyber skills shortage to the extent that it's discussed. I think certain areas, absolutely, there is a skill shortage of good people, but I think mostly it's about organizations either not wanting or not being able to afford the experienced cyber professionals. So because of that, there's a perceived shortage. I think that there are plenty of people with the skills out there, but they can command high salaries, and it may be that because of the operating model of an organization, they can't charge that resource out to justify a high salary. Certainly, though, in terms of the cloud, then yes, there will be. So I think, to answer your question, with the recruitment elements, certain niche areas, specific areas, there's going to be a big demand for skill and experience as well. That's a really key word there.
Absolutely. It's about finding the right person and not just any old person. Otherwise, they're not going to be able to fulfill the jobs that you hired them for, and you'll be back to square one. Okay, and what advice do you offer people looking for new employment?
Right, so let's go back to my violin days. One thing I would say to people is cybersecurity is such a wide and varied discipline that it doesn't matter what your background is. I think I've done a lot of recruiting in my time, running these business units. I devised and ran a graduate program at one of the companies that I used to work at a few years ago. And I'll tell you now that the best consultants, a lot of the graduate scheme was for cyber consultants, not necessarily for specific skills like penetration testing, for example, or security architecture. But in terms of consulting, the best graduates that I recruited by far were people that had no exposure to cybersecurity or computers. So politics graduates, geography, history, English, doesn't matter. Those that came with cybersecurity degrees tended to be at a disadvantage because they tended to think they knew it all because they'd done the degree, whereas those with non cyber degrees were much more open-minded. So what I would say in terms of the of becoming or taking part in this cyber profession, becoming a cybersecurity professional is, doesn't matter what your background is, doesn't matter what your qualifications are. I think if you just got drive and passion, a willingness to learn, and above all network, because there are, going back to one of your earlier questions, I see lots and lots of jobs advertised with hundreds of applicants. Mm-hmm. You need to stand out, and networking will help you to do that. If you've got a contact with a recruitment agency or with people within organisations, network.
Couldn't agree more. LinkedIn has lots of jobs, but everyone applies there, and you will get lost in the masses. I think networking is so important, but it's also about speaking to the right person and the right people, not just anybody. Speak to a specialist recruitment consultant who constantly does cyber.
That's a really good point, actually, Amy, on the recruitment, because it's such a boom area. This isn't going to abate, COVID or no COVID. We're always going to have need for cybersecurity professionals across that spectrum. So testers, architects, consultants, security managers, governance, risk and compliance, all these elements. And a lot of recruitment companies are going to see that as a cash cow. and will try and get into the space where actually maybe that may not be their forte. So yeah, absolutely. Find an organization that understands cybersecurity, because from a consumer point of view, you are going to, not you, but if a recruitment agency is going to present me to a company, my reputation is in their hands. And if they don't know what they're talking about, the client is not necessarily going to think, oh, well, that's just an inexperienced cyber company. They're going to think that candidate was.
And when it comes to cyber professionals, there are so many types. You know, you have to be able to differentiate the technical from the non-technical. And if you're working with someone who doesn't understand cyber or doesn't necessarily know that, you're going to be sent to the wrong jobs, and it's just going to prolong the process. Brilliant. Well, thank you for that. They are all of my questions for today. Thanks again for taking part. If anyone has any further questions for JP or wants the opportunity to be a guest on the breakfast briefing, please email me on amy.morris@talentorder.com or message me via LinkedIn. I hope you're all staying safe and well. I'll see you next week. Bye.